Hi, and welcome to the assignment where we will be examining performance task scoring guides. In the previous assignment, you had an opportunity to look at some performance tasks. In this one, we're going to look at how Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium is recommending that those performance tasks be scored. So you'll need to make sure that you remember which performance tasks you analyzed. You may even want some of your notes about those performance tasks as you do this. So let's get started. The first thing that you're going to do is visit the sample items part of the Smarter Balanced website, and you can do that by clicking on this link. And it brings up the sample items. Now remember, the way that we get to the performance task is by going up here, hovering our mouse over this menu at the top, and then we bring our mouse down to where the performance task is. In the last assignment, we looked at garden, so we'll also be looking at garden in this assignment as well. So we're going to click garden, and it brings up the performance task. In order to look at the way that the performance task is scored, the rubric information and scoring information, you just need to scroll all the way down to, for garden, for a couple more pages. So past this, and right here is where the scoring information begins. In this assignment, we're going to ask you to read through the way that these are scored and make some observations, and then think about how this scoring differs from the traditional right-wrong paradigm that we currently face when scoring standardized assessments. It's always right or wrong. This way of scoring, we want you to just look at some of the major differences and think about the implications for your classroom. So we're going to just kind of scroll through and look at some of the indicators of success that are outlined here on the performance task and the rubrics. And we also have a note sheet for you that's right here, the note sheet exam and performance task scoring guides. If you look in the Schoology area, you'll see that it's right here. You can download a copy, print it, handwrite on it, type into it. It is important to note that if you're using an iPad, you will not be able to do that. You can just maybe make some notes on paper. So we'll go back to the scoring guide, kind of scoot that over. And as we read through and kind of skim the scoring guide itself and maybe look at some of the sample responses for each part of the performance task, we're just going to keep track of some things that we notice. So for language arts, one of the things that we noticed is that the scoring guides are aligned to the intellectual work that students are asked to do. We know in the task, it asks students to give evidence. We know that the evidence has to be credible, it has to be complete, it has to be relevant, and so that's exactly what's being assessed and scored. Nothing that's not called out in the performance task is being scored. So the assessment and the way it's scored is completely aligned. There are also rubrics for different skills. This is something that you might notice as you look through. So this one talks about evaluating information and sources, but if you scroll down, this one actually talks about using evidence, which is interesting. So students aren't getting just one score for their entire performance task. They're getting scores for different skills so that as teachers, we can have better information about what our students are able to do and where maybe we need to adjust our instruction to support them. So that's something that you'll do, and just make as many observations as you can. The more observations you can make and the more you think about this, obviously the more you'll understand it. Then when you move to understanding the differences from the right or wrong paradigm, we're just really listing how this is a different way of scoring than what we're used to, especially considering standardized testing. Certainly some of us might already use rubrics in our classrooms in local assessments, but when we're thinking from a standardized perspective, this might be a little bit different. So for example, in traditional test items, there's really only one right or one wrong answer. There's not a range of what's possible. And if you notice in some of these tasks, the way that they're described, there's definitely a range of possible answers, which is really interesting. Also, we don't get a holistic score here. It's not just one score for the entire paper, or even one score for content and one score for conventions. Instead, you really are getting a score for different skills that students are demonstrating, which again gives us as teachers precise information about what students need in terms of the support. Then if we move to math, we also want to make sure that we're looking at math. And even if you don't teach math, it's important to understand what students are going to have to do in math and how they're going to be scored so that we can all figure out ways to build in those skills that might support our students, because many of them transfer across content areas. So we'll go back to our sample items, and this time we'll click math and bring that up, and again hover over this blue bar, and remember the last time we did field trip, so we'll click on field trip again, and we'll just scroll down until we get to the scoring guide, which starts here. Okay, and again, same process. We're just looking through the scoring guide. We're making observations about what we notice in the scoring guide, and then we're thinking about how this is a different way of scoring math items. So as we scroll down to our math here on the note sheet, one of the things that I'm noticing is that there's more than one correct answer for these different math scenarios. For example, students can get full credit for a variety of reasons. They might get full credit for correctly answering zoo if they're looking at total first place votes, or they might get full credit for correctly answering aquarium if they look at total first and second place votes, or they might figure out a weighted total for votes and answer science museum and have that correct as well. So there are multiple correct answers. It all depends on how students explain their answer that determines probably whether it's correct or incorrect or full credit or partial credit, which is a hugely different way of thinking about math. There's also a possibility for students to be awarded points for success at various portions of the task. For example, they get full credit if they have total cost per destination calculated, total distance per destination calculated, cost per student destination calculated, final answer expressed in correct units. All of those things will get students partial credit or full credit. If students miss just one part of that, they still get 3 points out of 4 instead of just getting the whole answer wrong. So when we think about how that's different from how math is currently scored, right now, especially in STAR testing or standardized environments, an answer is just right or wrong. It's a multiple choice item. It's right or it's wrong. There's no room for process. There's also no room to understand different ways of getting at a problem, or if a student comes up with an incorrect calculation, being able to go back and look at the process and award students credit for doing the process correctly, even if the answer is incorrect. There's also an expectation in this performance task and in the scoring guide that students actually express how they arrived at an answer. It's not enough just to get the right answer. They also have to be able to articulate how that happened. Now, certainly, as you go through these scoring guides and make some notes, again, make as many notes as you can. The more you do that, the more you'll understand these tasks, and it is important for us to have deep understanding of what students will be assessed on and how they'll be scored, both in language arts and math, no matter what we teach, as I said before, because of those transferable skills. Enjoy exploring these tasks, and we hope that you learn quite a bit from doing this assignment.